that your sweet love hasn't died. One more chance to keep you satisfied.
Good afternoon, parents. Welcome to our distance learning webinar. It gives me great pleasure to introduce myself, Ben Rothwell. For those of you who don't know me, I am the assistant head here in charge of curriculum and innovation. And today I welcome alongside me Mr. Paul Dowlman, who is assistant head in charge of teaching and learning. And he has a special responsibility for ensuring the continuity of education for our distance learning children. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Dowlman to the studio. Mr. Dowlman, how are you, my friend?
Very well, and good afternoon to all of the families who have joined us this afternoon. especially those who are already part of the program, and maybe some of you have just joined us because you want to find out a little bit more about how our distance learning runs. I'm just going to start, Mr. Rothwell. That is such an apt song. I think it was originally by Elvis Presley. That was a version by the Pet Shop Boys, I believe. Always on my mind.
Very apt.
Very apt.
Always on our mind.
Absolutely, you are always on our mind, especially if you are working distantly from home. Today is really just to set out some of the information that we've broadcast quite recently about distance learning, just to give a little bit more information and with a future event at the very end. So let's get started. But just before we launch into it, one of the most important questions I think parents have asked is, who is distance learning for? Well, it's really a lot of the parents who signed up their children were for reasons such as their child was vulnerable or health reasons, and they felt it was safer to keep their child at home. Also, children who are going through a 2-week quarantine phase, distance learning is really for them. So they've got 2 weeks of quarantining, and the online tutor can support. And of course, we've just recently added just a clause, which you may be aware of, is that if you are signing up to distance learning, we have a registration form which is available on our app. But if you're signing up now, you're committing to 10 weeks of learning. That doesn't include quarantine children. But let's launch into our presentation this afternoon. So the aim of distance learning is, frankly, 4 things: to ensure that all distance learners are following the same curriculum objectives as their peers in class. So they're not missing out on any of the learning objectives in maths, English, science, moral education, the subjects that we teach on a daily basis. And we offer to support through Zoom sessions, support time. So that may be in small groups, very much like it was when we were all distance learning together, starting from March last year. We do have an online tutor who is there to support, a trained teacher who will often get to know your children really well. To ensure that distant learners feel connected to the class they belong to. Some of the questions that have popped up quite recently is that whole thing about their child feeling connected to the class or their new class that they belong to. So I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And also to continue to monitor the children who are distance learning, monitor their well-being, which is hugely important, and their progress and attainment. So they're the aims that we've set out for our distance learning program. So what do the lessons look like? Well, if you've already started the online learning process, you will notice that the lessons are delivered through our Seesaw platform. So your child will belong to their class Seesaw, but also they'll belong to various other Seesaw classes, such as their music classroom, their Arabic classroom. If they're in year 3 to 6, their Spanish classroom. STEAM is also a part of that as well. So the lessons and the videos and the content is all delivered through and uploaded onto our Seesaw platform. And it's the same materials and the same lessons that are delivered in the physical classroom themselves. Whereas a teacher in the physical classroom may give verbal feedback, the feedback for distance learners will be given via the voice notes on the Seesaw. The lessons are modified, so that means that the class teacher who has had information from your past class teacher or information that's been passed on to them by the online tutor, if there are children who need to be challenged, the lessons are modified, and that challenge can further happen within the online tutor Zooms. And equally so, children can be also supported through activities on the Seesaw. For example, I know in year 3 in maths, they often put up something called chili challenges. Therefore, they're different levels, and some of the work is organized into deepening those skills, and the children can choose which level of difficulty that they choose, and also they can mark their own work against the answers to see where they've had success and equally where they need to have help and support. And of course, that ties in nicely to the online Zoom sessions that we have with the online tutor. There are videos that are put up onto the Class Seesaw videos, Class Seesaw platforms. Those videos will be a class teacher in that year group explaining the slides, explaining the learning for that day, and also uploaded onto the Seesaw platforms are such things as TT Rockstars, Spelling Shed, Education City, that you should have login details for, and that can be also used in elements. It doesn't have to be throughout the day. It could be at the weekends. It could be after school. It could be at the various times when you're on holiday. But the links are there that you can have a go and extend your learning that way. So they're all on your Class Seesaw. Another frequently asked question is about monitoring. So if my child is learning away from the class, how is the attainment and the progress and the well-being of my child monitored? So the online tutor who will be working with children in the Zoom sessions will be feeding back to the class teacher, their class teacher, about anything that they've found it tricky, anything they've needed support with, if the lesson needed to be challenged, what the next step for that individual will be as part of their learning. So the online tutor will feed that back to the child's class teacher. In addition to that, the class teacher will also be able to see the work that your child has uploaded onto the Seesaw and use the feedback tool as well. And that information will help your class teacher to make judgments on your child's attainment, very, very much like it was when we were online learning during March to the end of the year. So conversations and connect time, your teachers should have offered a 15-minute Zoom session per day where your child can connect. Now that might be in the morning to explain about what the day's lessons are going to be. That might be during a break time where your child can socialize with some of their peers in friendship groups. That could be at the end of the day. And it could be used as well for teachers to have conversations with individual children on the distance learning program, to just delve in a little bit more deeply into how they were finding the activities for that day. And again, that helps with the whole monitoring process as well. And just to make it more clear and to have records of the work and the attainment and the progress, the difficulties and the successes, we also have a distance learning education plan, DLEP, which is shared between the class teacher and the online learning tutor. And notes can be made and targets can be added to that distance learning education plan and updated regularly. And in the next parent meeting that we have, that will be there to be able to be discussed with you as a parent so that you can also see the progress and the attainment that your child is making. So that's monitoring. Staying connected. I know I mentioned it in the last slide, but staying connected is hugely important to us. Now, whether or not your child is feeling connected and happy with that at the moment, or maybe is feeling slightly isolated, we are now really working to make sure that your child feels connected. And we're updating it all the time, and we're meeting all the time to think of different ways that can really help support your child in that area. So All I could say is please utilize the Zooms that are set for you, especially the ones with the class teacher and the online tutor. They're there. They're there to connect you to the learning, to ask all sorts of questions. And it's interesting that when I was looking through the Zooms and from the conversations that I've had with the online tutors, we don't feel that they're being utilized enough. So please encourage your children to go onto the Zooms and use that to help support them and keep connected. Equally, specialists also have their own Zoom link. Music does, Spanish does, Arabic does, and you can find those Zoom links on the specialist Seesaw classrooms. Please, that is another opportunity where your child can connect to a member of VHPS and the specialist teachers as well. And they're open in, in the afternoon, usually all afternoon, but also some specialists operate in morning periods as well. So it's a good idea to check out the timetable. If you're not entirely sure about where the timetable is, they are on the class Seesaws. And if you email your class teacher, I'm sure they'll be able to send you a copy of the distance learning and class learning timetable as well. It's important to use the email to keep in contact with your class teacher, just like you did when we were pre-COVID, before this all happened. Keeping in contact with your class teacher, emailing any questions that you have about the day, about the learning. The class teacher is your contact. Please also try to keep updated with your class rep. Every class has a representative who's a parent. You can ask questions and check that you're not missing vital information. Keep looking at the mobile app. We have an assembly on a Thursday. You always posted a link onto the Seesaw, so you can click on that and have a look, and just keep updated with school events through the app, through the class rep, and other information channels such as Facebook. But staying connected, they're the main things to help your child and yourself feel really part of our community. That's staying connected. Pastoral. Again, well-being is incredibly important to us. Therefore, if you have a concern about the well-being of your child, if you are concerned about that, we have Miss Hayley Martin, who is our pastoral lead, and I've put her contact email address on the slide here, which I'm going to send out to everybody at the end of today's webinar. She's the person that you can contact in case you have any worries, and also your class teacher or your online teacher. They are 3 people that you can contact, within confidence and chat about any worries that you have. Who else should you contact? Well, again, the class teacher is always a good point of reference about the daily class routines and about, the learning. I am here also to support if you have any questions about the online learning process, about how to register, about where to find things if you've missed it. And again, the online tutor is available as well. Now, Miss Mia at the moment is taking a bit of a break from the distance learning program. We have Mr. Rothwell at the moment, who is going to be looking after the Seesaw class over the next couple of days. And we will be in touch to let you know who will be replacing Miss Mia as the distance learning teacher, online teacher. And we'll give you short details following when we know who that's going to be. At school, we have the Ellie animals, and I thought it would be really important to say that being a chameleon at this point of the year for all our children, for all our staff, and for all our parents is probably one of the most important skills that we have. And like I said at the beginning, we are constantly adapting and changing our approach as things are changing and adapting in our environment, the regulations and the guidelines that we're given as a school. We're adapting and changing. But I wanted to say that we're also listening to you, listening to how your children are feeling, listening to their class teachers to hear about what some of the challenges are. And, we're constantly looking at the policies to change and adapt and move forward so that we can increase the outcomes for all of our children on the distant learning program. So with that in mind, just thinking about the future, I thought it would be quite a good idea to have an informal distance learning coffee morning on Monday, the 28th of September at 9 a.m. And I'm going to send a Zoom link. I think the purpose of this really would be just to hear your views, see how it's going, and maybe, some of the questions and address some of the answers in a Zoom link where you can ask them face to face. I hope today that has been, in a nutshell, what our learning program is about. Again, please, if you have any further questions, please email me. You have my email address at the end of this. I'll be sending that out with this presentation. And I look forward to moving forward with distance learning over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Dowlman.
Back to the studio.
We're here together, Mr. Dowlman. Thank you very much for giving us that presentation. It was very informative for us all. We have a few comments and questions that have come through from parents on the live chat. So I just thought we'd take a few moments to address some of those. So we have Shima, who I apologize if I've got the pronunciation wrong, Shima, who's made a comment about the videos and notes on Seesaw are not enough for the children. Live lessons will be more helpful. And perhaps if I could start by addressing that point, Mr. Dowlman. I appreciate that parents have different perspectives on the best sort of approach to how distance learning works. And by all means, we are open to listening to the parents' suggestions. But in this respect, we have found during the mandated distance learning program that the methodology of providing pre-recorded videos worked extremely well for the vast majority of our parents. And we got a lot of feedback from parents who perhaps were unable to access the lessons at the sort of specific time in the day, and they used sort of later on to catch up with the lesson. So I think, Mr. Dowlman, that's probably one of the primary reasons that we don't adopt a live approach. And I think as well, I'll be right in saying this, and I'm sure you would agree with me, that we have an issue with Zoom in that it's, or similar programs, in that they are difficult to manage at the best of times, and having children in a classroom and also connected via Zoom is problematic for our teachers. And that's probably, from a technological standpoint, the most glaringly obvious reason why we don't do that. Would you agree with that? Is there anything you'd like to add, perhaps, to the? Yeah,
no. But just saying that. I know we had that conversation earlier today. I completely agree. It's certainly, that's one of the challenges. I would like to say about the. I think there was a second part to the question, which was about there's not enough being uploaded. And I think that just comes back to, our modification process, which is the online teacher, will, as they get to know your child, will kind of understand that they need to be challenged, and they'll be passing that information back to the class teacher, who will then be able to challenge and deepen and push even further. But what we've gone through a period of boot camp. We call it boot camp here at VHPS, where we set expectations and we get to know your children in the first 2 weeks. We get to know, and I think now is especially important since the children have been, they've been away from school for so long, and teachers are really getting to know the level, the challenge that's needed for their children. And, over the next few weeks, we will have a clear idea of who needs to be challenged, who needs to be supported. And I think you'll see a difference from then on.
And also, Mrs. Dowlman, Shima also commented that class teachers don't usually respond in the same day on Seesaw. And I recognise as well that can be frustrating, but obviously our class teachers are facing an incredible amount of stress at the moment as they get used to these new ways of working. And ordinarily in class, if we weren't in a distance learning environment, a lot of our feedback is given on a verbal basis, isn't it, Mr. Dowlman? Sort of the teacher would be verbally feeding back to the children. And I think I'd be right in saying that one of the things that we're looking to promote a greater use of it is interactions with the link tutor to show the work that's been undertaken. And the link tutor can actually act and give that verbal feedback, can't you? We have someone there ready to help and also to give feedback and challenge. And I think that's really an approach that we would really like to see parents take more advantage of, greater advantage of. Would you think that's right in me saying that?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Utilizing those Zooms, like I said earlier, is probably the best bit of advice I would give in today's webinar. But again, yes, I think as well, let's be patient with our class teachers. Like you said, Mr. Rothwell, they're facing, new ways, new days. There are some challenges to face, and we've just got to, adapt and change throughout this process.
We're obviously all getting used to these new ways, and obviously you can see from me, I'm currently working from home due to this. It is very different for us all. I've got a few more questions and comments as well, Mr. Dowlman. One from Ismail was, why is it not an option for families not comfortable sending kids to school, especially after the new cases? Now, I'm unsure if I'm in reading this correctly, but my belief, my understanding is that if parents wish to opt on to distance learning, that they are able to do that. I know there is a restriction that you've now mentioned today about that it's a 10-week process. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes.
So Ismail, if you do wish to adopt the distance learning approach, you are welcome to do that. Mr. Dowlman, I wonder if you could possibly explain the rationale behind the 10-week process, because a further comment did come in later saying that there was a suggestion that we reduce it to 2 weeks. So why is the rationale for the 10 weeks?
Well, to begin with, and we had to look at this really carefully. To begin with, we had such a large number of distance learners. And we realized that, yes, we recognize that some families, are concerned and want to keep their children, off school. But we were finding that there was a particular pattern as well where it was being opted in and opted out with. And it's very difficult, I think, for us at this present stage to be able to, work effectively when essentially your register is changing very, very rapidly. People stopping physical lessons and then going back into it, and that 10 week. I mean, obviously we're adapting and changing. We need to have another look at that. But in terms of the 10 weeks, we just thought if you are going to be taking your child out for terms of worrying, then maybe we need to have a guideline of how many weeks that was going to be. But surely, we could have a little think about and see how many uptakes there are as well, and look at that in terms of policy.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dowlman. And as well, Ismail also then commented, if kids are absent for other reasons, so say, for example, they have a slight fever or a runny nose, and we are definitely encouraging children to stay home if they are feeling unwell, do they have access to the learning resources through Seesaw?
Yes, absolutely. They have access to all of the lessons and the content which is uploaded onto Seesaw. That's all there for them. And if you if they are actually accessing the lessons and they're uploading it to the Seesaw, then your child's teacher won't be putting you down as an absent.
And yeah, so the children, if you're absent for one day just through to like a fever or something, the work will still be available for you. What you won't have access to in for those short-term cases is access to the distance learning tutor. Will they? They just have sort of access to the work that's been set, the previous.
That's right.
Yes, but they won't have the call that takes place with the distance learning tutor. We have just a couple more things to get through. We have some thanks that we appreciate all the parents that are making positive comments, and we appreciate all of your comments. Obviously, we are very reflective here at Victory Heights. Carla asks, do students doing just distance learning need to wear the school uniform?
So could you repeat that again, please?
Sorry, yes. Do students doing distance learning need to wear school uniform?
Well, that's a very interesting question. It depends on what you're comfortable in. It would be very nice if you're uploading a piece of work that you've done. It would be lovely to have you wearing your school uniform, because then, sometimes we can post that onto social media as a kind of a celebration of what you've done. But whatever's comfortable for you.
Yeah, I do think that's probably down to sort of the parent and personal choice. One thing I would probably say, if you know that I'm working from home, but I'm in my shirt and I've got my Victory Heights badge on, is that it is, in terms of mindset, being dressed and ready for school is probably a positive mindset for children who are doing distance learning. If they're in their pajamas all day, I'm not saying that's wrong, but I would just suggest perhaps if we do encourage sort of a routine, getting up, brushing our teeth, getting ready for school, and approach it in that way. That I think during distance learning, we got a bit of feedback from parents saying that seemed to work for them. That sort of kept that routine and that continuity of going to school, even though it's remotely.
I think that's a really good question. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about mindset. I know that, when we were back home from March to the end of the year, I think I would always wear my tie and my lanyard, and because it was my mindset. So I think I've never even thought about that as terms of policy, but definitely for mindset, that would be really useful.
But we have, I think, one last question before we go, and I actually don't really want to delve into it too greatly. So it was a positive message towards the siblings or the child in year 2 who fell unwell to COVID. And it's a question related to quarantine restrictions and things like that. I just wanted to address to that parent that we have published today on our mobile app frequently asked questions that definitely addresses that particular question. So I don't want to delve too much into it here. Please look at the frequently asked questions on the mobile app. We've been advised by the DHA. We have our own school doctor. We take advice from other regulatory bodies. And all of the information that you should need to answer that question is contained within that document. So I think that does draw us to a conclusion, Mr. Dowlman. I realise that we managed to address a lot of the questions, and there are obviously some comments that are still outstanding. I realise the parents do have their differing views. I hope in our answers to your questions that we've at least given you an understanding of why we've made the decisions that we do. And I hope in listening to Mr. Dowlman's presentation that you were able to gain a greater understanding of all the support mechanisms and structures that we have in place. Before we go, Mr. Dowlman, is there anything further you would like to say?
Just on the back of what you've said, we are a reflective school. We do listen, and we do delve deeply into how our parents feel, how our children feel, and how our teachers feel as well. And the decisions that we make are based on that. When we do meet regularly to discuss and move forward with everything that we do. That's right. So I think with that, Mr. Dowlman, we'll draw it to a close.
We obviously look forward to welcoming all of these parents back for our distance learning coffee morning, which is on Monday, the 28th of September at 9 a.m.
That is correct, yes.
And further details will be available on our app, but it will be at the same address that you would have typed to get to this webinar. And we look forward to seeing you soon. So it's goodbye from me.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful
Take
evening.
care.